Welcome, everyone, to our panel on the changing energy landscape, specifically energy transition, investment trends, and predictions. I am Felix Phillips, Houston partner and corporate lead for the emerging companies and venture capital practice at Baker Botts. I also serve as the co-lead for our support of the ION. I've served on the advisory board for the Rice Alliance for Technology for over 10 years. In addition to supporting the ION and my participation with the Rice Alliance, I also will be leading our support for the recently launched Rice Alliance Clean Energy Accelerator to be located at the ION. It is a pleasure to be here with everyone today as part of our inaugural Innovation Summit. I would now like to take a few minutes for our expert panelists from AES, BP Ventures, Sonova Energy, and Syzygy Plasmonics to introduce themselves before we start our discussion. Our first panelist is Alashina Jackson from AES. Alashina?
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today, and nice to meet all of you virtually. I am Alashina Jackson. I work at the AES Corporation. I head up our governance of innovation. That means I work throughout the areas of innovation that AES has. Everything from sort of our incremental innovations through our customer-focused innovations and into our advanced technologies. Happy to be here.
Great, thanks, Alashina. Next, we have Chad Bown from BP Ventures.
Good morning, everybody. Chad Bown with the BP Ventures team. So we're a corporate venture capital team that is investing really across the spectrum. We've been around since 2006. We've got a team of 15, have a good stake in the ground here in Texas and in Houston, and happy to be a part of the ION. And looking forward to the conversation today, but really the key themes are how are we investing across this energy transition. So hopefully that comes through in some of my answers. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Chad. Next, we have John Berger with Sonova Energy.
Thanks, Felix. I'm John Berger, founder and CEO of Sonova Energy. Sonova is a residential energy service provider, primarily using solar and batteries, but also getting more involved in load controls and in EV charging and secondary generation sources like gensets and possibly fuel cells. So we look at ourselves as a wireless power company. We only serve residential customers at this point in time, but we do have a wide and growing footprint from near Japan with Guam, Saipan through Hawaii, California, Texas, and Puerto Rico, and as far north as Massachusetts and New Hampshire. So we are incorporating new technologies, financing those new technologies for our customers, and then providing the service just as a utility would. So when something goes wrong, it's our folks that roll to the home and fix things. And something you want from us as a customer, you call us, and we're the ones that will hopefully take good care of you. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to providing our insights on the distributed or decentralized part of the power business, energy business.
Great, thanks, John. And our final panelist is Trevor Best with Syzygy Plasmonics. Trevor?
Hey, thank you very much, Felix. So at Syzygy, we are making a completely new type of chemical reactor, one that is fundamentally different than every other chemical reactor on the planet. What our technology allows is for the creation of chemical raw materials that help society, things like fuel, which is how everyone gets around, things like fertilizer, which is how everyone eats, and hydrogen, which everyone is so excited about. The creation of these materials without the need to combust fossil fuels. So we allow them to be electrified and run on renewable electricity using our core technology of photocatalysis. So we are using that renewable electricity to power LEDs, which illuminate our photocatalyst and make these chemical reactions happen, and ultimately allow for cheaper, cleaner chemicals for a better society. So happy to be here on the panel with everyone.
Great, thanks, Trevor. Well, let's commence with our questions. Our first question is for Chad Bown. Chad, according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, global investment in the low carbon energy transition totaled approximately $500 billion in 2020. Can you talk about some of the innovative ways BP is pursuing investment opportunities or innovative technologies created by the global transition to a lower carbon energy system?
Sure. Thanks, Felix, and excited to be the first panelist to go first. So I think, just contextually, the planet's carbon budget has a limit to it. It's finite. It's running out fast. And so, my view is, and BP's view is, we're going to need everyone's help to be a part of, this energy transition or energy system. And we kind of have this mindset that, if you're a company today, you need to be a greening company. And, thinking about different technologies and/or investments to make you a greening company. So, earlier this year, BP came out with a refresh strategy, which essentially said, that we want to be net zero by 2050. And that's a huge stake in the ground for a, quote unquote, oil and gas company that we were previously. But you're starting to see our competitors, the Shells, the Totals, really following suit. And that's great. We all need to be a part of this energy transition. And so I think what we've, positioned as a company and kind of BP's investment strategy is that, we're not considered an IOC anymore, an international oil company. It's really, an international integrated company. And so that means that we're likely going to see a reduction in our oil and gas production, but an increase in investment in, alternative energies, i.e. renewables and clean tech. So that's exciting. That fits very well with our ventures group, our ventures space, but to know that, we're putting investment capital behind that strategy. And so I think you're going to see investments around an integrated energy system. So how do we, further touch our customers? Could be behind the meter, could be at their house, faster ways to, get them in mobility, faster ways to charge your car, looking at retail sites, but also, something that we're doing, not just from a capital perspective, that I think is interesting is we're partnering with, countries and cities to help them on their energy transition. And in particular, we're the lead energy company with the city of Houston to manage, their strategy around their particular energy transition. So we can, bring our expertise, our engineers, but also our technologies to help them do that. And then finally, digital innovation, those are two key components, looking at digital across the map as to how we make things more efficient, reduce our carbon intensity, and then innovation. We can't do this without innovators, entrepreneurs, and hence the reason that we like the ION, we like this panel, we like those that are a part of this discussion today. We need you. And so happy to be here, and thanks for the question, Felix.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. And all those initiatives sound very exciting, and we look forward to seeing them progress at BP. Next, we have Alashina Jackson. If you could tell us a little bit about how AES has been at the forefront of strategic alliances at the convergence of energy and technology with companies such as Google. How do you foresee these types of collaborations continuing to drive innovation at AES and across the energy industry to implement greener and smarter energy solutions for large-scale corporate customers, utilities, and municipalities?
Thank you. Yeah, I think Chad touched on this a moment ago, sort of this collaborative working together nature, right? This is essential to moving forward in green technology and the outcomes I think that we're all striving for, right? Reducing carbon footprint and the like. At AES, our purpose is really to accelerate the future of energy together. And we put that very thoughtful part of together into our purpose, because we see that together with our colleagues, together with our ecosystem partners, strategic partners, but super essentially, to your point, with our customers. So within our core energy offerings, that can mean bringing our customers along on their individual journey to meet their sustainability objectives. So that partnership with our customers to get them using clean energy technologies, whether that's solar, wind, battery storage, Those incremental innovations with those customers are essential to the global migration to the clean energy economy and a net zero carbon outcome. When we look at our customer focused innovation, customer trends and priorities are essential as a signal to our transformational technology development. We don't just say, well, here's a new cool technology that we want to implement, right? We ask, what is a meaningful intersection between new cool technology and the customer experience that merits transformation? So, of course, we also need to ask, what's possible if AES plays a role in that transformation? It's really important to always be thinking how we contribute as a company. And as an example of that, we've put into action a solution called Motor, which really simplifies the electric vehicle adoption process for our customers by solving for end-to-end customer experience, including charging rates, equipment, car selection, purchasing experience, right? So the customer serves as an essential partner in those sorts of innovations as well. And then finally, our customers are certainly at the center of solutions that are inspired by their needs, their objectives, and their high priority outcomes. These sorts of solutions are typically developed closely with a lighthouse customer. So you mentioned Google as an example, or a set of beta tester customers. So our Google project was a recently announced first of its kind 24/7 carbon-free energy supply agreement. It's a 10-year agreement, and AES will be managing a portfolio of diverse green energy resources to ensure a 90% or better carbon-free energy delivery measured on an hourly basis. And so these types of collaborations can serve as the market proof point for new ways to reduce our global carbon footprint, takes the big challenges and shows that they're possible. And it's this willingness of AES to take on those customer outcomes as our own that really makes the difference between a seemingly impossible objective and finding the path to what is actually possible.
Great. Thanks, Alashina.
Thank you.
John, next question's for you. Looking specifically at the renewable energy component of energy transition investment, solar continues to lead the way in terms of investment dollars. How do you see the importance of grid independence, specifically through home solar power generation and off-peak battery use? What is needed in order to work with electric utilities to realize broader grid independence?
Thanks, Felix. We, as I often say, at Sunnova, we are experiencing not only a decarbonization megatrend and obviously leading that, but the decentralization megatrend. A lot of this, and you're seeing actually real-time acceleration in demand from consumers, and we serve specifically single-family home owners right now exclusively. You're seeing a lot of demand from those consumers for energy independence, and specifically around the concerns that I feel are brought about by climate change, hurricane and storms, flooding, wildfires, and indeed this morning, and the papers are full of these stories about what's happening out in the West and the hurricane season, the hurricane that could hit us, at least in Louisiana, pretty soon. So this is literally sparking a large amount of concern from consumers to essentially take matters in their own hands. Now, we as a service provider are there to be that wireless power company and make sure that everything is taken care of and that they have the power. But the fact of the matter is the centralized system is no longer good enough. No amount of money that we can throw at it is going to give the level of reliability and resiliency that more and more consumers are demanding, not just wanting. Some of that is, again, as I said, has been a mega trend. That both mega trends were accelerated by the pandemic. This, as you can imagine, working from home is something where you cannot be on a virtual call without power. And I've had some of those experiences that are pretty funny, being interviewed by folks and they lose power all across the country. And so we are looking more and more, and I founded the company to deliver better energy service at a better price. And right now, the resiliency, reliability, as you have with a backup generator, which is also in very tight supply, you have batteries and so forth that are not outside some of the island markets that we're in, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, below the grid price. California, you have some of those areas that you can be. But as the battery costs drop down, you will see that more and more so you can have a better energy service at a better price than what any monopoly can give you. I think that's obviously a competitive situation with the monopolies, and I think it's more to be realistic about it, dependent on the regulators and the leaders of states and indeed, obviously, the entire country, to make sure that consumers are protected, to make sure that they have the choices and opportunities where, candidly, in many cases, they do not have in their power provider right now. So it's more about how do we work together to make sure consumers get what they deserve. They deserve a better energy service at a better price. They deserve access to the technologies. And so that is something I think we're going to hear, I'm confident we'll hear more and more about, is how do you do that? How do you make sure that all people get access to this technology? So you hear a lot more about low, moderate income folks. And so we definitely have a lot of answers on that regard. Most of the country, if not all of the country, has essentially a credit backstop that's given to monopolies and utilities. We would like the same thing. We think that is very doable to be able to offer that. Would that come with more regulations? Yes, I would assume so. And then we're embracing of that. So I think it's more about the transformation of the energy business, not just in the stationary side, not just in residential marketplace, but also on the transportation side, coming together and figuring out that how are we going to make this happen? Because change is here. It's not coming. It's here. And it's accelerating. So we need to come together and decide how we're going to do this and make sure that nobody's left behind.
Great. Thanks, John. Trevor, the reduction in overall emissions is crucial to the energy transition and global climate change goals. Can you talk about how Syzygy is commercializing its technology to reduce emissions using light to replace heat from fossil fuels in chemical manufacturing and production? And what is needed in order for these types of technologies to reach commercial scale?
Thank you very much for the question, Felix. And I quite like it. It's tempting as a startup CEO to get up on my soapbox and talk about how amazing Syzygy technology is, which it is amazing. But the question is how we scaled. So I would like to take a step back and look at the past few years of my life and my co-founder's life. And if you go to 4 years ago, it was basically him and I, working out of a garage, so to speak, and bugging Rice University to give us time, let us look at this technology. We connected in with the professors. We started evaluating it. And a few years ago, about 3.5 years ago, we quit our jobs. Spent some time raising money, formally opened the company, opened the doors, started to scale up in 2018. At that time, the technology was really tiny. It was like, microscopic, 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter, interesting science. We managed to scale it up about 1,000 times into a reactor that's about the size of your hand, hired our first 2 employees. We're paying ourselves basically poverty wages to get through this period. And in that time, we actually did break a lot of world records in our field of science. So we proved that we had something very valid, raised more money, about $10 million, built out a new facility, grew to about 30 employees. And about 2 months ago, we just raised just under 25 million. And so now we're going to grow to about 60 employees, much larger facility. The reactor right now is about the size of your head. The next one is the commercial version. It'll be about the size of a washing machine. So this has been kind of the ride of a lifetime. And, talking about like growing the organization, growing the technology, a tremendous amount of challenges. And the reason why I'm saying all this is because, things don't just drop out of the university right into industry. It takes a tremendous amount of work. It takes a team. You need lots of different things. So going to the second part of the question, what do startups like ours need? And there's a few key needs. One, and the most important, is capital. That whole story I just told you is impossible without very significant capital infusions to grow out the team. Talking about building a reactor, unlike anything else that's ever been built this big, costs a lot of money. So capital. And after this, space. You can't just go I say we started in our garage, but there's a lot of laws preventing me from operating a chemical reactor in my garage. You need very specialized space that is suited for this kind of scale up, and it's not common. We ran into huge problems during our scale up because when we've got 4 employees, we're like, okay, we need a facility, and our realtor would take us to some 100,000 square foot behemoth, that was left over from one of the oil companies that would cost us, $500,000 a month. We're like, oh my goodness, there's no way we can afford this. So finding space that fit us along that scale up pathway has been very challenging until recently. Talent is always very important. In the early stages, a startup cannot always pay, especially in Houston when you're competing with, the wonderful energy companies that have made this city very strong. But when you're competing with them on salaries, and someone has an option to go work for a startup or go make 2 or 3 times as much money at a big energy company, it's hard to attract them. And, people who are excited about working in these kinds of companies and who are enthused about that opportunity instead of just bummed about the salary cut in the early stages, it's very important to find those people. And finally, customer support. So we have been lucky in that our customers have been very supportive of us since the beginning. They've given us time, let us ask all the dumb questions, because ultimately you are building something that will go into industry. And if you don't understand exactly what they need, there are a plethora of examples where people have built things that no one actually wants. And so that customer interaction is very important from the beginning. And if you have those things, you can start to build a very strong ecosystem and have a lot of different startups rolling out of it. I'm excited because, and especially with this panel, I see a culmination of events happening in Houston right now. The capital is flowing in. We are getting spaces like the ION and Greentown Labs. We have a tremendous amount of talent, and all of the companies are now focused on the energy transition and what's new and coming. And so I've never been more excited about the future than I am right now.
Great, Trevor. That sounds very exciting, and we look forward to hearing updates from you in the future. So our next question will relate to batteries. So perhaps we can have a roundtable from Al, Sheena, Chad, and John to chime in on this. Is it realistic to expect that battery technology will advance enough that we will be able to scale battery capacity and demand? Do you expect that the new innovations will eliminate or reduce environmental impacts? And what are the investment opportunities for battery technologies today?
I'm happy to go first. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I think batteries are just super exciting. They're very versatile. There's so much they can do. You asked a question about scale, so I'll just talk to that point of batteries. I definitely think scale battery solutions are possible. And, I would reference a recent win on our part at AES of the Edison Institute Award, the U.S. Edison Award specifically for Alamitos battery energy storage project in California, which, was actually built in place of a natural gas peaking plant. So it was a full plant size substitution. So scale, check, right? Like concept proven, right? 100 megawatts, 400 megawatt hour solution. So that's to give the listeners an idea of the scale of it. The project is able to supply tens of thousands of homes in less than a second, right? Again, batteries, versatile, exciting, and it meets really large local capacity needs. So grid scale battery projects like the Alamitos project enable greater grid reliability through voltage and frequency regulation, match supply and demand through load following and ramping services. And then, of course, it can help our systems defer upgrades, both at the transmission and the distribution level, by meeting peak demand and reducing congestion that may have otherwise required, heavy capital investment to do those upgrades. So excited about batteries. Thanks for the question.
Great. Chad?
Sure. So I guess I could take a little bit different angle. And as we know, batteries are the hot topic. I think GM just came out they announced they're going to build 2 new battery factories. So a lot of capital going into this space. If I could just get my computer mouse to last more than a week on its battery, I would be a happy camper. But we kind of look at batteries from two angles. So from a storage, low carbon energy, but then also mobility. Batteries and EVs and fast charging batteries. So two areas that we look for investment would be increasing the battery capacity and kind of confidence level. Going to that kind of fast charging battery, could you go to a gas station or retail site and charge your battery in 5 minutes, similar to filling up your tank of gas? So we've made an investment in a fast charging battery company based out of Israel. But I think the other part that, as I kind of look at BP and our skill sets and expertise, as we look to battery materials and access production of those materials, I do see a scenario to where supply will be limited. So thinking about lithium, cobalt, nickel, and also limited from how it's brought to surface or produced. So there are, we think, cleaner ways to get access to those materials. Thinking about lithium, in brines, for instance, subsurface. Is there a way to produce that much cleaner than using surface application that's done today? And that could be a BP skill set. We know the subsurface, we know how to drill wells, we know how to manage water, and we can do it at scale in large projects. So we've looked at a few opportunities within that space. But I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to make investments in batteries over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years. I think it'll be a hot space.
Thanks, Chad. John?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, we are seeing tremendous amount of demand for batteries, and it's not just you put one battery in a home. We're seeing multiples, desired by our customers for whole home backup, which as recently as I would tell you 3 years ago was deemed a crazy thought. We continue to see innovation. We continue to see more and more companies, rather large, well-managed companies, well-financed companies come to market with products, specifically the energy storage system. So this is your Tesla Powerwall, your Generac Power Cell, your Enphase InCharge, and SolarEdge is coming out with a product as well in the next few weeks. There's many more. There's Panasonic, there's LG, there's CATL, there's a bunch of Chinese firms that I don't think any of us have really heard. Well, we've heard of them, but most people haven't, that are coming. So there's a lot of competition globally, and all of that competition is going to result in ever faster product innovations and changes. So that's the first one. Second is that I think where a lot of folks missed and still continue to make mistakes is they think that what's happening here is dependent on one technology, for instance, solar or all batteries and all lithium ion batteries. There is, when you want to see a major technology disruption of an industry, it is a collection of technologies that feed upon each other that really provide that major disruption. So if this was only about solar here, it's interesting, but it's not as interesting as when you start combining solar with batteries, with some load management, possibly a secondary generation source, whether that's genset, whether that's a fuel cell, and then software capabilities of managing the loads differently and so forth. So I think, that was a major mistake in electric vehicles, and a lot of people missed them, including me. I'll say that. And then it's a major mistake that people have made in solar. And now I think, and I've seen it, even some of the best chemists in the world says there's no way that this is going to work. We're going to have this breakthrough technology. And yet here we are again with lithium ion, and hopefully there'll be some solid state technologies on the lithium ion side and so forth. So it's coming, and it's coming fast, and it's really incremental in improvement and innovation in conjunction, in combination with the additional technologies that are also improving incrementally, that are really causing the leap forwards in the adoption rates to accelerate as fast as they are. So that's something that we constantly remind folks. It's just not just one thing. It takes a lot of technologies, and we have them. We're seeing it.
Great. Thanks, John. Sounds like this is a question, if we revisit it next year, we'd get tremendous update on where we are. So we'll keep that in mind. Next, Chad and Alashina, perhaps you can respond to the following question. The Biden administration has met with private banks and asset managers to discuss allocating $4.6 trillion to the clean transition. What key questions have investors had regarding related projects or technologies? And where do you see more investment dollars flowing? And where do we need increased innovation in order to maximize these clean transition commitments? Chad?
Sure. So we like the engagement with business and with government, and are excited about the Biden administration in some of the proposals and also capital they're committing to this energy transition, which is great. Renewables is the fastest growing source of energy, and it's been that way for the past, I think, 5 years. And will continue to be that way. And as energy consumption continues to grow, renewables will play a big part of that. And so I think this clean transition, the 4.6 trillion, a lot of that is going to go into renewables. And so as we look at BP Ventures and where we're making investments, a key focus for us is what we're calling kind of zero carbon energy. And so that's the solar, that's the wind, that's the biofuels, but also geothermal. And so, those are kind of 4 key buckets that we're seeing investment deal flow and making investments. We invested in a company called Ever Technologies, which is a geothermal company based out of Canada that we think can really scale their opportunity and not need a very specific aquifer, which has always held geothermal back previously. The other 2 boxes, nuclear, could probably fit in there, and also hydro. We're not particularly focused on those 2 areas, but also opportunities that could have scale for sure. And so I think our strategy ties up to that. I could see us making a few more investments in the geothermal space. We currently have a wind business, BP Wind, which is onshore and also offshore. We're developing the first New York State offshore project alongside Equinor. So excited about that, offshore wind. And then we've also got a solar business in Lightsource BP. And so, investments that we're making to make those businesses more efficient. Could be new solar panels, could be a more integrated offer, a digital offering to add to their subset or their business, are all things that we're evaluating in that kind of clean tech space. With that, I'll hand it off to Alexina.
Thanks, Chad. Yeah, I guess I would add sort of some thinking around the infrastructure that supports all of the renewable energy that we talk about, right? We're talking about making big investments in renewables. We're seeing the increase in distributed energy resources. But I firmly believe that to really realize their full value, their full deployment, and then to be able to think about optimizing and seeing how they interact. And as John was talking about management, right, of the assets, right, that's part of it. I think we really need a lot of investment in the underlying infrastructure. That can be at the transmission layer, that can be at the distribution layer, but I kind of put those together and think about, in my mind, as grid 2.0. So what does that future grid look like that enables that full optimization, that full coordination? So imagine the future where grid 2.0 enables us to optimize beyond price and physics to things like locational marginal carbon impact, or even to enhance resilience of the grid, right? So if you can get those distributed resources working together in real time or near real time to respond to risk events, whether environmental or cyber, to say, oh, we see a change in the grid, let's now rally resources to either absorb energy or dispatch energy or whatever it might take, islanding, sky's the limit. But if we really think about enhancing that infrastructure, I think it will, one, be able to help us right size the investment in the energy itself, but also really then rethink, our optimization and planning.
Great. Thank you both for those comments. John, the Treasury released its general explanations, also known as the Green Book, of the Biden administration's fiscal year 2022 revenue proposals, including the repeal of many tax preferences for fossil fuels. If these proposals are signed into law, what are your thoughts on how it will shape the industry, let's say, over the next 5 years?
This is a tough question to answer, but the more I've thought about it, the energy business is really not well understood by most folks. And what I would also say is that I've come to realize over the years, and in particular, even recently, is that even folks that are in the energy business don't fully understand how much the government is really involved in this. For instance, the power side of the energy business in the United States has such heavy government involvement. In many cases, either the federal government or the local government, the cities, literally own the power system, not only the generation, but the transmission and distribution lines. And all utilities are so heavily regulated that literally the more money they spend, the more money they make. Now, I'm sure all of us on this call would love to have that business model. I personally would love, I'd give anything for that. And then on the oil and gas side, the international marketplace with OPEC, plus Russia, is very intrusive with government. These kind of actions in OPEC is literally illegal in the United States. And so I think that we need to step back and have a little bit of empathy for everybody across the energy space, particularly those that are trying to run capitalistic companies as much as we can, and first understand the landscape on it. So with all that said, some of these subsidies, and there are subsidies in oil and gas, but those are there primarily to make sure that we have an oil and gas, domestic oil and gas industry for national security purposes. And those are still needed. In my position on that is we need to make sure that as we're transitioning off hydrocarbons, we still have some ability while we're making that transition, so we are not caught wrong-footed and so forth. So we need to have that appreciation. I'm not saying we should keep them, get rid of them or whatever, but we need to have that appreciation for why they're there. The other side of this, on the power side, it is much more deeply involved in subsidized. Every utility has a highly subsidized cost of capital. I always find it interesting when CEOs of utilities say, well, I have such a low cost of capital, we run such an efficient operation. I was like, yeah, because that's the government giving it to you. We need to make sure that when we look at things, whether it's hydrocarbon power, whether that's coal, whether that's gas or oil, whether that is wind, whether that's solar, storage, et cetera, that everybody has got subsidies. We can argue about, well, I think yours is better than mine, bigger than mine, and all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, everybody's got subsidies. I don't like subsidies. I think that we ought to get rid of all the subsidies and to see who wins at the end of the day and have the consumers choose. But the political reality is that's not going to happen anytime soon. So if everybody else is showing up with subsidies, then I guess, we in the solar business and storage business have to do so as well. And until somebody comes in and really has an overhaul on the regulatory structure on a national level, because I do think it's going to take a national level, then we are going to have this situation where there is massive government intervention at all levels, including international, and we're going to have some subsidies. And I think that someday we'll be able to move forward with that, like I said, but right now that's just that's where we are, and at the end of the day. So we'll continue to see these arguments and so forth, but I think in the foreseeable future, we're going to see more and more of the state intervention leaning towards the renewables, this so-called new energy economy, the clean energy versus hydrocarbons. But I think across the board, subsidies are unfortunately with us for a while.
Great, John. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's very interesting to kind of think of the energy industry and all the interconnects and the multiple dependencies. And I think you summarized and packaged it very well for us. Let's see, the next question, perhaps we can get all of our panelists to chime in on this. Keeping in mind the topic of this panel, energy transition, if you found yourself on a 30-second elevator ride with President Biden, what message would you want him to take away? Let's start with Trevor.
Yeah, so if I had 30 seconds with President Biden, I would have two messages. The first is that energy. You should encourage collaboration between technologies and don't give in to hyperbole. And so I believe it was John earlier who talked about it's going to take a village, a lot of different things working together. One solution is not going to fit every situation perfectly. There is no silver bullet. Please focus on a variety of different pathways. And the next would be you should be like Syzygy and go beyond green. And what I mean when I say go beyond green is you should focus on transparently counting the actual carbon emissions across the entire value chain. This is called a life cycle assessment, and you should focus on this instead of branding, such as green or renewable. There's a lot of different shades of green, and emissions can hide in a lot of areas. Some of these shades of green are not nearly as clean as you would hope that they are. So please go beyond this and start focusing on life cycle carbon assessments.
Great. Alashina?
Yeah, I mean, I like Trevor's comment about being aware of sort of the actual impact of a project. So my focus with President Biden, if I ever got it, would be to really talk about the locational value and marginal impact of energy, right? So in other words, as we're putting all of this clean energy investment in, and we're thinking about putting all of this into the various places around the world, but in the US, we need to understand that it matters where we put it. So specifically, more green energy in California is not the same as green energy in jurisdictions where there's currently less green energy. So that's sort of that locational value concept. So, to the point that I think I've heard from all of the panelists now, the idea that there needs to be a plan, there needs to be coordination, there needs to be thinking about not just individual investments or individual energy resources, but thinking about how the relative investments with location in mind really can drive the greatest impact in the short period of time.
Great, thank you. Chad?
So we are still under COVID, so this would be a lot of people on an elevator 6 feet apart, so it's got to be a big elevator to start. But I think where I started at the first question, the idea to support green and or what we're calling greening companies, and the idea that everyone needs to be at the table. And so, excited about the Biden administration that's got a commitment here, but, the small players, the big players, part of the policy, investment plans, it's going to take everybody. And I guess one key component, we do support as BP carbon pricing. I think that helps to reward companies that are as part of greening their company, being more efficient as part of the energy transition. And then, it's a disadvantage to companies that don't want to be a part of it. So I do think carbon pricing is one component that I would try and relay in that very short elevator ride.
Great, thanks, Chad. John, 30 seconds with President Biden.
I think it's really about, as Chad just said, making sure that you have an all-encompassing view about not only the incumbents in the particular areas of the energy business, but also the new startups, which I think we'll all agree on. And the reason why that's so important is the more that you give consumers the option, and you can guide through structure and policy, but let the market work, let the consumers give what they want, you might be very surprised about where this goes. And that means that it could be very much, and it usually is, at the detriment of the incumbents. But there will be much larger companies that rise up, that employ hopefully tens of thousands of folks with good paying jobs, transform the energy business for the better, give consumers a better service, a better price, and obviously cleaner. So be embracing and making sure you're not listening to the incumbents all the time. They need to have a voice, but everybody else needs to have a voice too, and making sure your policy is accommodative of that. Do not let the incumbents snuff out innovation early just because it may be a detriment to their business model.
Great. Thanks, John. So Alashina and Chad, let's talk about ESG initiatives. Ambitious long-term environmental, social, and governance, or ESG mandates, are being announced by major companies around the world with goals to reduce their carbon footprint and/or emissions by 2030 and beyond. Do you think companies are doing enough in the short term to meet these long-term goals? And do these long-term mandates really represent change that will impact the immediate short-term needs? Alashina?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that the longer term goals are necessary, but I don't consider them sufficient. I'd say they're necessary because they help create the business case and opportunities for energy solutions that are going to help our customers meet their ESG goals. But I also hope that we're going to strive to continuously improve and update those standards, because as we exceed them, hopefully, as we go along, we want to keep moving them forward so we have higher and higher targets to meet, and therefore accelerating the energy transition. I also think, I think the first part of your question, some companies are being very ambitious and they're proving out that they can exceed the standards, right? And that's really important because some of the other companies are not being as ambitious and they're just trying to meet that minimum threshold. So I think that combination, is what's going to keep us, moving forward at a better than the minimum standard approach. I do also think, though, that the companies that are moving ambitiously and exceeding standards are going to prove out in the market to be the winners. There's already been some evidence of, heightened interest in investing in those type of entities. And I just think that gap, that moat between those who are lagging and those who are accelerating is going to become bigger and much more significant to the success of the companies.
Great. Thanks, Alashina. Chad?
Agree with everything you just said. I guess just to follow up on the last point, if you look, I guess follow the dollars. If you look to the amount of capital that's been put into global ESG funds, it was approximately 1.3 trillion in 2020. And that's up 50% from 2019. And so there's power in ESG. There's power in where that investment capital is going to. And I think we're going to only see it increase. And then one final stat, the two top US equity funds with the strongest returns in 2020 both had a clean tech and clean energy focus, with returns over 200%. So, investors are getting high returns on it. That's going to further push this ESG conversation, which is good.
Great. Thanks to you both. Trevor, as we continue to seek solutions to mitigate carbon emissions, the concept of a circular carbon economy has gained notability. Do you think the circular carbon economy is a viable path forward? And if so, what technology solutions are needed in order to reduce, reuse, recycle, and remove carbon?
So I know we're getting close to the end of time, so I'm going to keep my answer very short and sweet. So you asked first, is this viable? Not only is carbon utilization viable, it is absolutely crucial to the future. Based off of the research that I'm seeing, there is no path to a global net zero that, or even really achieving our goals under the Paris Climate Accords that does not involve some form of carbon utilization. And as far as to what technology solutions are needed, a fantastic example is Syzygy technology. We are a platform tech. A lot of people who are watching us are looking at us in relation to our ability to decarbonize hydrogen, which is amazing. But we are also very, very adept at utilizing CO2. And so we were actually recently awarded an NSF SBIR Phase 2 grant for turning CO2 into methanol. And our light-based chemistry influences things like activation barriers for reactions, and CO2 being a very happy, stable thing. This is why it hangs out in the atmosphere for so long. Needs a lot of energy and needs things like our technology to help reduce that activation barrier and turn it back into useful products. And so this work's been published in Nature. We're very happy to be advancing it and commercializing it along with our hydrogen technology. And in the coming decade, I think CO2 utilization is going to be one of the biggest, hottest areas for venture and industry and startup growth. So any VCs watching, open your eyes. Any corporations, start looking at new technology, and any universities and students, now's the time to start these companies.
Great. Thanks, Trevor. Any other panelists have anything to add there?
Well, Felix, I would say, while I can't dive deep on the circular carbon economy topic, it just makes me think about sort of tying back to the first question you asked me and about our customers. I've definitely seen, that when we think about carbon, we have a great value proposition to drive for our customers, which is in their own value chain, as we help them solve for that carbon equation, whether, through technologies like Trevor was talking about, or the green energy technologies that we're often talking about. We really do enable them to improve their own brand and product acceptance in the marketplace. So as they think about their value chain, their carbon inputs, we can all be very transformative for them and their own ability to get market traction by helping them in that part of the equation.
Great. Thanks for that, Alashina. Trevor, Syzygy was invented at Rice University. How can universities do more to support the development and commercialization of innovative energy technologies?
Yeah, so I'd say first and foremost, the most important thing that these universities could do is make it a priority for their Office of Tech Transfer to work with startups and create dedicated roles within their offices of tech transfer to work with startups. And I note this because, whenever we were starting, it was me and my co-founder, we are not BP, we are not Shell, we are not, licensing and patent experts. We don't have a lot of the resources that other parties they're used to interacting with do. And we need a lot of help. And so training the offices of tech transfer on like what has worked for other ecosystems, like the ecosystems out of MIT and Stanford, and giving the resources that are committed to working with startups is absolutely critical. The next thing I'd say is get involved with the colleges, the MBAs, the grad students. Heck, the whole student body is this mixing pot of great ideas and technology. You need a very strong outreach program into the student body to explain to them, like what it takes to start a company and encourage people to start companies. And finally, as you're doing this outreach in the student body, you should connect them in with founders who are walking the path. It's important to show, students and really early stage entrepreneurs that like it is possible, and show them examples. Like, here is someone who is doing it, who's walked that path. Founders love to talk to other potential founders and tell them about all the landmines they've stepped on. And so, getting them into a room together to help encourage the students and provide mentorship and advice is absolutely critical. And I'd say those main things.
Great. Thanks, Trevor. John, perhaps you can quickly answer the following. How can the average consumer navigate the ever-changing energy landscape, and how can we all do our part to support the energy transition?
I think increasingly what you're seeing, it goes back to my earlier comment about multiple technologies, and Alashina said this as well, but it's about service. And that's what this company does, is provide power service to the customer. We don't put some widgets or panels, batteries in people's houses, and people tend to think of them as more product oriented. I can go to Home Depot and buy one of these things and put them in my house. And that's not the way that this business is set up currently in terms of the energy business. And it's not, in my opinion, where it's going to go. And so what we're seeing is a lot more, including some of the established incumbents in both the power and the oil and gas side, look towards how do we take these technologies, maybe package them with software supply, a software platform, and make it easy for consumers to understand what they are, more importantly, to interact with them. How do I make this easier? And that's certainly our rallying cry here in the company, is how do we make it simpler for our dealers? How do we make it simpler for our customers? And that's what's driving us. And so I think you're going to see a lot more emphasis on that. As far as what can you do to be as part of the energy transition, I agree with all the comments that were made. Trevor's especially on here's the full cycle. I could do more. I want to do more. But again, I need to get more information, make it simpler for me to do more. And I think just taking a little bit of interest out there and looking to engage companies like all of ours and others, I think it will increasingly, you'll be able to find whatever you need, and it should be simple, and you should take advantage of it, make the decision, and move. It's as simple as like going into deregulated power markets is make the choice, make the call, take the 5 or 10 minutes, and make the decision to change.
Great. Thanks, Sean. I guess we're nearing the end of our panel, so I'd like to perhaps get a response from all of our panelists to the final question. In 6 words or less, what is your key message for succeeding in the energy transition? Chad, you want to go first?
Sure. So, the planet's carbon budget is finite. It's running out fast. So we need everyone's help. We've talked about it, big companies, small companies, startups, to be a part of the transition. So excited to be in the middle of that and hope others join us.
Okay. Trevor?
So I'm going to use all 6 words. Count the carbon, maintain organizational flexibility. Not the sexiest 6 words, but very meaningful. Count the carbon, maintain your organizational flexibility.
Great. John?
My message is to the entrepreneurs out there, first, go for it. But my one word of advice is focus. Find something you want to do, focus on that. The biggest detriment in our industry to success is trying to do too many things at one time. Small companies and big companies, focus.
Great. Alashina?
Yeah, John picked a really good word. I'll give 6 back though. So think in ecosystems and in coalitions. So ecosystems because we need many players to reach big goals, and coalitions because I think we will all move faster if we align around standards and protocols.
Great. Well, that concludes our inaugural Innovation Summit panel. And on behalf of Baker Botts and the ION, I'd like to thank each of our panelists for providing us with in-depth insight into key trends and predictions in the energy transition. However, the summit is not over yet. Please tune in to the Houston Startup Showcase featuring Energy Tech startups tonight at 6 p.m. Central. Please see the link in the chat below to register. We look forward to seeing you there and hope you will join us for future ION Innovation Summits. Have a great day, and thanks again.
Thank you.